30 Deuce, hatched June 4th, 1984, East Coast flavor style, Justin Gerace. You follow me at Gerace Ceramics. It's hashtag GERACE, Follow me, like my stuff, hate my stuff. Tell me my stuff stinks, tell me you like it. Give me some reactions, anything's better than no reaction. So, I guess to me personally, it could be whatever I want it to be. I think I study all this stuff all the time, and like what's supposed to be art, the Sistine Chapel, or maybe the way like a squirrel finds a nut and buries it. Is there some artistic thing to that? I try to take all the stuff currently that's happening around me in my life and put it into my clay work. I try to draw on a ton of influence from like hip hop community, a lot of counterculture stuff like skateboarding, graph writing, rapping, freestyling. I try to work with this balance of like control and intuitive way of working. So it's kind of an open-ended question. It's kind of difficult to answer. That's like it's more philosophical for me. Like if God made a rock so big that he himself couldn't move, it's kind of that level of answering. So I guess this art question of what it is, at least for me, it's so open-ended. It really could be anything. To kind of live in a world where, I don't know, you can go buy some print of a Van Gogh painting for $5, or your toilet brush is this level of like design now to it. So art it bleeds into all our everyday lives. I try to, just like in my studio, live with my sketches. I try to live with it as much as possible, as it brings this kind of aesthetic beauty, even if it's not, let's say, beauty in the traditional sense of floral patterns or whatever one might think is beautiful. I think cracking and decay and erosion and those kind of textures are pretty beautiful to live with. So art is really open-ended for me, and I feel like it's this huge pool, this ocean that I'm just floating in the middle of, and I could really swim in every direction, and the only thing I'm not trying to do is drown, I guess, and stay afloat in it. Because, well, I guess since Duchamp put that toilet out there, it's kind of all okay. I look at it, and I said this in an earlier video for this critique I had, I kind of look at it like comedy. It's either all okay or none of it's okay, and I find a lot of stock in paintings that are rendered unbelievably this three-dimensional plane on this 2D surface, or I respect the guys that make a line on a canvas, and however they want to go under the minimalist context of it. To me, that's just as important. It's just as artistic. Who am I to say what anybody's proclivities of concept or design or aesthetic are? Mine's more raw. It's in your face. I try to do a lot of graph work that's not just colorful. There's a lot of, let's say, hidden undertones and secret ways of like communicating. Like you might not be able to read the text or the graph that's on there, but I could read it. Other writers could read it. Is that art? I don't know. It's a platter. It's gonna hang on the wall. That says, "I fear the Jake." Jake is slang for the 5-0. That's slang for the cops, the Jake, and I fear them because they'll wax you in a heartbeat without hesitation. But if you look at it, the last thing you would think about when you see this is that this piece is about police brutality. So it says how I fear him here, but it's kind of abstract in a certain way where you can't really, like, this is the F for fear. But it's got all these other serifs and these other kind of traditional things with text to abstract it more. Got this little kind of like musical note, but this is a rap lyric that I took out of context from Big Pun. Shout out to the Bariquas, So I took that out from Pun, and then underneath here I got all these other people's names that have been murked by him, that were unarmed for doing nothing, for just being out there. So I really don't think most people would look at this and say, yeah, this is about police brutality, but try to hold these like subtle, undertones in the work. Because that's the kind of stuff that I'm into. It has this like, it just doesn't invite an experience. I want people to have an experience when they look at the work, but the most important part for me is I want to try to challenge them. Not when I say challenge, I don't want to challenge them to where they're believing in the same stuff that I do. I'm not trying to sway people. It's not propaganda. I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm trying to invite this challenge where they have to look at it more, or they could tell I'm kind of speaking in this, like, coded language that only a certain small demographic of people like could understand. So it challenges more. Maybe they need to do more research. Maybe they just need to stare at it longer. Maybe they need to Google something or figure out how the patterns lay down. Anything like that where I could get people to stare or engage in my work longer is an important aspect of what I kind of want my art to do, and the way I try to approach like making it. Big Pun is this huge influence to me, and Wu-Tang, and everybody knows that. And just a lot of this hip hop stuff, and I'm listening to this song, and in the song he has this lyric, and he's like, I feel the marijuana snake bite anaconda. I'm Anavanna with water trying to match my persona. Sometimes rhyming I blow my own mind like Nirvana. And I try to think about that every time in the studio, where sometimes in the studio I would blow my own mind like Nirvana. And I really don't know what the end result's going to be. I have an idea and I try to work towards something, but just like the glaze is always fluxing and melting, my work is always in a state of flux, and the idea changes from A to Z. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing, and I don't really rest on my laurels of it's got to be a certain way, it has to come across this way, it needs to be this way. If it changes while I'm doing it, that's that organic change that I think helps keep it fresh and helps keep it raw. I draw on a lot of like this influence from like music, and most people's albums, their first or their second album is usually the best because they're still hungry. My sister, I needed a ride home from school when I was a freshman in high school, and she was a senior. She was working in the ceramic studio, and we had this teacher, Ralph Grimaldi, shout out to Ralph, and he taught my mom when he was fresh out of like his teaching license. He taught my neighbor, who was my friend growing up, and he taught my sister. My sister won some awards, so growing up, it was always kind of like who could do the best in Grimaldi's class. So when I was able to take ceramics after she gave me, that ride home, she's like, well, I'm not going to give you a ride until I finish working in the studio. So you could just sit here and wait for me, or you could touch a little clay. And so I guess like the medium kind of chose me versus me choosing it. So I touched the clay, and like, a lot of people, like this sensory thing kind of took over, and then I kind of fell in love with it. And this is way before I knew I was maybe 13 or 14. I guess I feel like most people, they choose to become artists because it's a very tough line of work, and it's a line of work where there's a certain level of passion that's involved, and it's kind of hard to turn off that passion. So just from working in whatever medium or material, even if flexing your identity isn't a part of the way you work, it's going to come out there a little bit just for the possession of this raw passion that you have. With me personally, I want my identity to be in there big time, because art just isn't something I do, or it's not just like a job. Even though it's a job, it's a fun job. It's more like a way of life for me. It's my life, and I try to put my heart and soul into everything I'm doing, and I want my identity to be in there because it kind of helps me through the struggle of climbing the ladder in art, dealing with working 7 days a week, 18-hour days, and still being poor, or still not having enough to show, or the 1,000 rejection letters that you get before you get the one acceptance. And I think one of the hardest things that artists try to do is put their identity in the work. Anybody can learn a technique over time. There's books, constant research you could do about technique and how to blend colors or make a warm palette, or how to carve, or how to do that. But how do you put your own personality and your identity in the work? There's not like a chapter on a book on that. That just comes from working. Like, I'm constantly being challenged, especially in academia, of, well, are you, my work started to be a lot more, I guess you might say, painterly, or let's say I'm approaching these works, I don't want to say necessarily like they're canvases, but I'm doing a lot of painting, so I'm constantly being challenged over, are you decorating or are you painting? So this hierarchy, especially in academia, is always challenging you of like, well, what's the function of it? Why are you putting him on this platter, which is this traditional functional thing for serving food, and why is it hanging on the wall? But then, let's say for painting, for example, what's the function of a painting? To hang on a wall? Paintings could be on the floor. I don't know. People always tell me I talk too much. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff I like to say. I like to. It's a lot of hard work, and a lot of late nights, lonely hours, and I thrive off the fact that I like to be the first man in and the last man standing. And it's a brutal line of work, and it's hard, and I never forget that every time I come into the studio. When opportunity knocks, only two things happen. You're either gonna walk through that door or somebody else's, and I don't want it to be somebody else. I want that shit to be me, you know? And I don't wanna. I was tailor made to be an artist.
Say goodbye.
Bye.